I wanted to talk about the process for tax audits and just disputes with the tax office generally, because I think it's important when you're in this situation to kind of know what you're getting yourself into, um, and hopefully that will help you. So let me just share with you what I know, which I hope will be helpful. Okay, so I'm going to start big picture first and just go through how the whole chain works with the tax office in terms of if they're auditing you and you've got a problem, during the audit. Then I'm going to go through how the audit process works specifically so that I can give you some background on that and you can kind of know how that works. And the third part I'm going to go through is give you some tips on how you should deal with an audit, and what you need to be thinking about. So let's start with the first part, the process. So there are a few stages. The first stage is there's an audit. Now, that will give some kind of result at some point in time. It might be something you like, it might be something you don't like. But let's say you don't like it. Some people have the option of doing what's called an independent review, where the audit is reviewed by a different audit team, and they might agree or disagree with the audit team or agree in part. But at the end of it, you'll get what's called an assessment, which is basically a bill and says you need to pay this sum. And it could be some big number, or it might not be. Maybe you're happy with it. Maybe you're not. Let's say you're not happy with it. Stage is going to be going through an objection. And the way the objection works is you say, look, I got this assessment, which is this bill, I don't like it, and this is why it's wrong. Now, the objection officer will have a look at it, and they might agree with you, or they might disagree with you, or they might think that you're right, sort of, in part. And they'll make a decision. And they'll say, okay, here's a new assessment, okay? And you will get that. Now, you're either going to be happy with that or you're going to not be happy with it. But let's say you're not happy with it. You're going to say, you're going to appeal it. And the next stage is to take it either to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal or to the Federal Court. Now, if you go to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, it's a no-costs jurisdiction. What that means is if you lose your case, you don't have to pay the other side's legal fees. So let's go through how an audit works. Now, audits are a primarily information gathering exercise, okay? And what an auditor is really trying to do in small business, if you're a very big business, it's different, but in small business, is work out what the truth is and if they can trust you, okay? So they'll ask you for your bank statements. You might as well give them. Why? They already have your bank statements, okay? They contact the bank directly and the bank will send them your bank statements. I've had clients who don't have access to their bank statements for some reason because their business is closed or whatever and they can't log in online, but the tax office is able to get them straight away. And then sometimes when I've needed them, I've asked the tax office to send them to me and they've done that, okay? Because they just get the bank statement straight away. So you might as well give it. They're really testing whether you're an honest person, okay? They've got all your bank statements. If you send them to them, which they already have or they can get, they can see, oh, this person is honest. They're giving me the information that they have, right? They have this many bank accounts, I know, and they've given me the same number. Okay, that's a good thing. Okay, that's a good thing. The other stuff they'll do is they'll call you, maybe talk to you early on. Whatever you say early on will stick to you, okay? Because they generally hold the view that whatever you say at the start is true, and then later on, maybe you've had a chance to think about it and you've said something else. So that's why it's very important to not say anything unless you're absolutely certain that it's right, okay? If you start off, someone rings you, says, oh, what's your turnover? You're like, oh, I think it's 50,000 a month, and you're just guessing, and it's not that high, the tax office is going to hold you to that, okay? Now, you might later on go and check your records and say, oh, it's actually, 45 or something. No, they're going to hold you to that 50, okay? Because whatever you say at the start, they assume is more likely to be true and unfiltered. So you've got to be very careful about what you say. The reality is most people are guessing at the start, okay? Because they don't know these numbers off heart. They're just going to guess. Don't guess. That's a very, very dangerous thing to do, and it won't work out for you. So just don't do it. They're gathering info. Another way that they'll gather info from you is by meeting you and they might try to rattle you a little bit. Like they might say, okay, let's have a meeting. I'll bring a guy, but 5 guys come. Like something like that, just something out of the blue, something that just would rattle you a little bit. They'll do that. Then they'll have a look. How is this person reacting to this situation? Have they got something to hide? Are they sweating? And they're kind of always assessing you. They're always assessing you. They might ask you questions that suggest that they're your friend. Like, every business has some cash, We always see people, they've got a little bit on the side or whatever, as suggesting that it's okay. So that you might come in and say, oh, I do that as well, thinking that it's okay. It's not okay. But, so they're constantly assessing you. They're trying to figure out whether you're an honest person and whether you're giving them honest information, okay? Because then they know whether they can rely on that information. So that's a very critical step in any audit process, is working out your honesty and the honesty on the information you're providing. Now, if you don't come across as honest, or they find things that suggest you might not be telling the truth, then when you're giving them information later, they're going to look at that and think, oh, this might not be right. Okay, so it's very important to come across well, okay, to them. After they get all the information, they might not even read all of it. I would suggest as well, if you do send them information, to send them only copies, because they don't always, they're not always in a position to send your information back. Sometimes they do lose it. And if it's your original source documents, that has caused people problems in the future, because if they go through the process of objection and through the AAT, they need to put that proof forward. They've sent it to the tax office and the tax office has lost it. You're not going to have that available at that time. So you just have to make sure you're sending them copies. They're going to look through it, and they might not tell you exactly what they're looking at. They do keep that a little bit to themselves, maybe in general. And at the end, they'll come to you with a paper which sets out what they think the position is. And you'll have an opportunity to look at that and reply and say, look, you've got this wrong, or you've got this wrong, or whatever. So that's how the audit process works. Now, what do you do? You're probably thinking, what can I do in this situation? I think giving them a dump of random information is probably not going to be helpful. What I would suggest to people is have a look at your taxes and figure out what your position is. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be paying tax on what's correct. You're not going to be paying tax on some made-up figure most of the time. It's going to be based on what the law says you owe. So instead of having sleepless nights and wondering what's going on, do a bit of a deep dive, have a look at your files and work out, okay, what do I owe? Have I made any mistakes? What are the implications of that? Just know where you stand, okay? The reality is most people, they might have done their taxes pretty quickly. They might not have checked every single transaction, okay? There might be some mistakes in there, there might not. But you should know where you stand, because at the end of the day, if you know what your tax position is, then you can feel fairly confident that some way, somehow you'll end up there. And that's basically the maximum amount of your exposure. Don't try to get the auditor to finish the audit quickly or anything like that, because they don't do that. They don't cancel audits. They need to go through their whole process. So if you've gone through your material and you think, oh, I might have made a mistake here or there, the next step in the process is to tell the tax office, look, I've gone through my material. I made a couple of mistakes. Here it is. Maybe I owe a bit more. This is how much I owe. That doesn't mean it's over. They're going to take that information, they're going to look at it, they're going to verify it, and they're going to say, okay, you're right, yes, you do owe this, or yes, you owe this, but picked up a couple of other things. It could go whichever way. And then they'll tell you. So it's very important to start off and know where you stand, because without that, you can easily get into a very stressful situation. If you've gone through your accounts in detail and you're fairly confident that you don't really have any tax exposures, then if they come in, they try to rattle you, you're not really going to be affected by that. It doesn't matter because everything's fine. If they come in and they, ask for all this data, it doesn't matter because the data is going to vindicate you anyway. So you kind of have that confidence. If you've got a mistake in there, then you can strategize around how you deal with that. It's not going to be a big problem. It can be resolved. Everything can be resolved. So I wouldn't sit there and sweat and think, oh, what about this or that? These things can all be resolved. So, you just need to have a good strategy in place for how you're going to do that, and then you'll be fine. So those are my tips in terms of how you deal with an audit. The best way, the process. That's what I found in my experience to be effective, and hopefully it will be for you as well.